Good morning. So let's have a chat over tea or whatever you happen to be drinking. This one's probably going to be a little bit of a long one, and besides the nature and whatever happens to pop in, you're really not going to have anything to watch on the screen, so you can just put me on in the background and take a listen. So today I just want to talk about my journey through witchcraft. What that's been like for me and what I've done and where I am. So I'm pretty lucky. I grew up in a super Catholic household and went to Catholic school, and at about age 9 I decided that there were problems with the religion. And so I started exploring, and I spent 25 years, the first 25, doing research, just looking at everything, going through and looking at different spiritual traditions and religions, and into occultism and witchcraft. And I also looked at a lot of science, because a lot of, at least what I do, witchcraft-wise, I deal more in spirit and unseen. That's my avenue. And so you're always dealing in energy. And there's this fight between religion and science, and there doesn't need to be, because they can work in partnership with together. There are things that we can see and understand from a scientific perspective that gives us a place to start, or the base understanding of what's going on, or some expanded base understanding. If you go into water and understand energy, vibration, frequency, water, understand these concepts from a scientific perspective, and it opens up a huge door as far as what that means when you're working with that element in magic, or when you're doing a spell with it, or when you're just, living and communicating with yourself, with others. Huge impact. And it started from a scientific perspective. And our science can't really tell us everything. It gives us a start. But there's a lot of things that we don't know as people. There's a lot of unanswered questions out there. We only know a small portion of how the brain itself works. That doesn't make the brain any less real, and it does not make it any, less functional. It still does what it does, even though we don't understand it. And that's the witchcraft side. So the science, only takes us so far, or only gives us one perspective of it, and the witchcraft gives us the other pieces as we're going through and connecting and doing our practices and, being part of that energy. That's another thing. We only perceive a very small percentage of the world around us. We see in light waves, and we hear in frequency, yet the human eye and the human ear can only perceive a small slither of what is there. And so think about that for a minute. You live in a world where there is more things you do not see and perceive than there are things that you do. Pretty wild. And it's not that they're less real, it's just we can't perceive them with the human limitations. And that's okay. I think that there are times and places and people that, because of the way they vibrate and vibrate outwards, that they give us spots where we do. see what's unseen. We do have the ability to perceive it, and from sound, from sight, from experience, actually experience it in physical world. People call them, all kinds of things: demons, angels, fae, gnome, spirit, dead, and it's kind of a combination of everything, because generally those things are all unseen to us in our normal day-to-day, just walking around lives for most people. But there's something that always connects us, and that's the energy. The web of energy we're all on, and we're all playing within, and we're all living within. And that's really what I'm doing when I'm tapping in to my witchcraft. It's for that, to experience and be part of that larger energy web that's around us, those layers that we don't see and that we feel. That's soul senses. We use soul senses to feel and to connect and be part of that energy and be able to manipulate, use, shift, transform that energy for certain specific goals, creating new outcomes. It's why we do magic. And there are all kinds of modes of magic and magical practitioners. Some are very ritualistic, some are very folk magic, and folk just means of the people. That it's, what you would commonly think of your healers, natural healers. So think before modern time. Your healers, your midwives, your brewers. There was a lot of aspects that people talk about with brewing, like brewing beer and stuff. Not sure how witchy, but they seem to like that. So anyway, your people that they would have been considered counselors. So the people that helped others through transformations and times of turmoil in their lives and things like that. And then you had your shamanistic type people, the people that dealt with the unseen, that connected with the spirits, that were able to speak with them and talk with them and be a bridge to this world, the one that we experience as humans, and the wider world that is all of us together. Because we share the same space. We share the same energy, but at the same time, we're not always perceiving because we're on a different vibrational frequency than them, what can be perceived. And so what we do affects them, what they do affects us. And so it's kind of behooving of us to to connect and to find a way to communicate together and work together. And so when we talk about, you'll hear a lot of witches talk about working within nature and being one with nature. It's one of the more common, highly practiced parts of witchcraft, is that connection and being part of nature. Because if we're all really honest, we've lost that in our societal physical world. We are so disconnected from nature in so many ways, and that has done damage to us as people. It disconnects soul more from the body. And so the body is more front facing, and it's the one that, is all about physical world and physical self and desire. And then you've got the soul that is connecting to everything and, has the ability to get information, even on an unconscious level, getting information from the unseen around you. Intuition, emotions, when the little goosebumps come up on your arm because something is about to happen. That is you unconsciously, perceiving that, and then your body unconsciously responding to the receiving of that. What witches do is we want to take it from an unconscious to a conscious. So instead of just getting a feeling, we get a message. Instead of just, getting a brief moment of an intuition, we get to see what's actually happening and the full picture. That's why we want to connect to that. That's why we want to connect to energy. It's why we want to understand it. And it's why we want to, work with that in our witchcraft. So that's why I started. A lot of research into all kinds of different paths and traditions. And, just to see. And what I kept finding through that process was, at the core, they were all the same. We use different words. We dress it up differently. We have our own sets of rules that we put on it and all this. But at the core, they're all the same. You're dealing in energy. You're dealing in love. No, that sounds hokey, but it's true. At the core, it's all about love, compassion, and, understanding that you are a part of everything. Everything is a part of you. What you do to it, you're doing to you, and vice versa. The whole point of that is so we lived in aligned harmony with the energies around us. That's the best life. If you think about it, that's it. At least I think, whatever. I think it's the best life to have that alignment and balance with it. And it gives back when you do. It's a partnership. It's an exchange. So once I had all, that kind of understandings of, what I knew then. Throughout, I was also working in witchcraft. I was using the things I was learning about and experimenting with things and trying things out, and to see what the results were. I'm a results-based person. If it doesn't have tangible results, then either A, it doesn't work, or B, doesn't work for me, or B, it's just not something that's my mode. I'll vibrate different. So, I wanted to see what was real, what wasn't real. I am a very research-oriented person, and so that puts a lot of the logic side in there, and so that you get skeptics. You have that little skeptic inside you that's always, is this real? Is this not real? How can we break this down? What other possibilities, all the way down to 1,000,000 to 1, can we think of to give a logical explanation for something? If you're like one of those people, you're not alone. There's a lot of witches that are out there like that. And I think to a point it's healthy, because it puts reality into it. It is the marrying of the soul and the body. So, there has to be some kind of measurable, not for everybody else, but for you, that you can see. Otherwise, why are we doing it? Why are we doing the witchcraft in the first place? Anyway. Okay. So that was kind of the beginning. And I was very element, nature, energy. These were my three main modes. And everything that I was doing at the time was involved in that. Understanding, feeling, heightening my soul senses in order to do that kind of work. And maybe it's because of the type of person I am. That's why energy is so huge, because the primary work that I do and the bulk of what I teach and all that is all spirit related. It's all unseen related in all kinds of different aspects. It's very much a core of my practices. But I do think that the understanding of all of that gives a good core base for any practice. Somebody said recently that not all witchcraft is energy based. And I would disagree with that, because everything is made of energy. If there's not an energy, then there's nothing there. Even our inanimate stuff has a certain type of energy in it. It is little atoms and molecules vibrating at a certain frequency to create concrete. And so, there is energy happening within that, even in our inanimate. There came a point where, up to this, I wasn't dealing in deities, guides, anything like that. I was just connecting to the energy and the nature and understanding and learning. And, experimenting, seeing what would happen if I did certain things. And I got to this point where one day, I'd never done tarot or oracle, wasn't an interest of mine. And one day I just had this massive urge that I needed a tarot deck. And I was like, what? But the feeling was there. And so I went online and I started looking around at different tarot decks and stuff. And I wanted something different. I'm very art oriented. And so I hate the artwork on Rider-Waite stuff. And so I was looking for decks specifically with art, ended up with the Dreams of Gaia deck. I will say that I think this is the perfect deck for doing any type of shadow work, any type of personal transformation work, and any divination that has to do with the self. Not the outside world, the things outside of yourself, but the things within yourself. Your behaviors, your alignments, all the things about you. Dreams of Gaia deck, hands down, it's oriented in the way of elements, but every card is focused on the self. The major arcana is different. Everything's different. So if you are used to Rider-Waite and you use this deck, don't look at it. Don't try to equate it to Rider-Waite, because it won't match up. I've had students that have tried. It won't match up. And so look at it as something completely new, a completely new tool if you have to. Don't look at it like tarot. And it's got a very detailed book. You can, it's fabulous. It's a fabulous deck. And the artwork is absolutely beautiful. But I got the tarot deck. And I was like, okay, now what? And so I just started shuffling it up and just kind of sitting there like, what am I supposed to do? And then I was like, whatever. Okay, tell me what you want to tell me. And I shuffled, and I had a feeling and drew the card. And I shuffled, and I had a feeling, and I drew the card, because that's how I shuffle. I shuffle between every single one of my cards. And then I just had this, kind of stop feeling. And so flipped them all over and looked at them, and it was telling me a story. I could see the story just within the artwork. And then as I was going through and reading the different cards and stuff in the book, it just flew together, and I was like, oh, that's neat. Again, skeptic mind can do all kinds of things, and we can make things out of pieces and parts. It's what we do. But it was neat, and I immediately had this feeling of presence. And it was, and it was right there. It was the Morgan. She was right there and ready to start working. And so I started playing around with some spreads. I started doing some stuff to, start that connection. And I didn't even know it was the Morgan specifically at that point. I just knew it was something. And it was something familiar. I had felt that energy for so long. It's something familiar, an undercurrent of it. And it was just weird. Anyway, but I've told these kinds of stories about that beginning. So I don't want to go into too much detail here. This is already going to be long. But having a guide and going through it with some kind of guide, I see deities as guides. And so for me, they're teaching me things. They're showing me things so I can have bigger knowledge, more understanding, and growth for myself and for my life, because when I change, my life changes. So yeah, it was exponentially different. The growth was so fast comparatively. I mean, everything was just so fast. All the changes, all the transformations. And I spent about 10 years working in deconstructing myself and, deconstructing things that I thought I knew, and, bringing new understandings and building new foundations. I was also learning a ton of skills of how to not just feel and get a sense of the energy, but to really go deep in that and have full communication back and forth, just like you're talking to a friend on the couch. Careful what you wish for. And to be able to really shift and move and weave energies together. Lots of skill building, lots of, heightening up soul senses and learning about tools and creating tools and changing tools for purpose. And during that period, where I was really getting into it, really stepped on the path and was like, I'm here, this is what we're doing. And when I did that, what I was doing, how I was experimenting, how I was playing with energy and witchcraft, really changed through that. During that period, it was very physical oriented, so the space and what the space looked like was important. The tools were extremely important, the physical ones, your herbs, the candle itself, all these things, very, very important to me, because we're visual people, we're tactile people. We learn through our senses. Our senses tie into emotion, and that solidifies a memory. And so, yeah, we're doing so much when we're doing the tactile representational magic. And we need that. At least I needed that. I needed that in the beginning in order to really see and feel how those energies were mixing, what I was doing with them, and to also create bond. it's really weird when you're in that representational space, that even things that don't need representation, we put them on there anyway, because it helps keep our mind focused on the things we can't see. We are so conditioned in our society to ignore everything coming from soul, that by the time that we are adults, for the most part, not everybody, for the most part, when we become adults, we have stuffed that down so far, and we have separated our body so far from our soul that it becomes what we think of like conscious and subconscious. The body is the conscious and the soul is the subconscious, and sometimes it's a little bit closer, and some people push it so far down, they are so disconnected from it that they seem like they're soulless, like they don't even have a soul. I mean, there are a lot of factors, I think, that go into that, but everybody's different. Everybody's starting from a different place when they come to witchcraft. Some are going to have to work a lot harder than others in some areas because of whatever disconnections that they've made. But representational magic really helped me get back to that point of marrying not just the physical plant itself, but everything from soul senses. So through that, I am retraining and rewiring my brain to start processing those soul senses that I told it not to process before. And so eventually you get to a point where you don't need it anymore. You don't need to do the spell jar. You don't have to have everything there for your candle. You don't have to have the candle. You don't have to have any of the representational things, because you've gotten your mind reprogrammed to automatically connect to those things through the energy, because that's really what you're changing, is energy and flow of it and its vibration. That's what changes the world, because that's what everything's made of. Anyway, and so I grew, and these things weren't as important to me. I didn't need things. I just needed to keep being 1 foot in both worlds. 1 foot in the energetic, 1 foot in the physical, 1 foot in soul, 1 foot in body, and trying to keep that alignment. It's not always equal balance, because sometimes we need more soul senses, sometimes we need more physical. But it's an alignment. It's a harmonious alignment between the two, flowing together, dependent on the need. And when I got to that point, I was just like, wow, this is pretty amazing. I've learned so much through all of this. And I had been mentoring people at different points in foundational work and stuff. I had done all kinds of different things in community works. But it was really that time. We need more death doulas. We need more death emissaries. So death doula helps the dying and the grieving. A death emissary deals in all of it, the seen and unseen. And we are highly, highly focused on what we don't see, the unseen around us, and the connections between everything. Deal in transformations, because everything's always in a state of transformation at some level. And so, I started writing books, and then I started the Death Emissary course, and teaching other people, and getting them, talking to them about teaching other people. And I think because a lot of it's about soul healing. It's about healing that rift between soul and body, and it's understanding transformation, what that means, letting go and moving forward, the death and the rebirth in all its, small forms to the final form. And so, yeah, I really started focusing outward into the community a lot more. Started writing, started making videos, started sharing, my experiences, my stuff, every step of the way as it was going on. And sometimes people don't like that because it seems messy. Because it is messy, it's a journey. It's going to shift and change. It's going to grow as we grow. If our practices don't, if our understandings don't change, then what are we doing? We're stagnant. We're not moving. We're not growing. Some things may always still be there in some form. Some things may go away altogether. Some things may grow, period. It just, grows into a different mode of it. And I don't feel it's a bad thing to show that. I don't think it's a bad thing when we show those confusing and irritating and frustrating moments. I don't think it's bad when we share, stuff that didn't work. I tried this spell and it failed miserably. It's not, people are so enthralled and focused on image, but that's not what the journey is like. And if we try to sugarcoat it all the time, and I see people, only telling the good side, or they're telling scary stories, trying to get people not to do something or go against one of their rules or whatever, it doesn't matter. But they're not showing the messy parts. They're not showing the day-to-day, frustrations, especially if you're coming from a skeptic mindset. You have to put in checks and, all kinds of things, verifications, and, trying, you're never going to get a scientific process where you can give proof to everybody and proof for them. You don't need it. You need proof for yourself, and you need to trust in yourself to have that kind of proof. But we do all this, and we have our experiences, and we have our own findings. There will be things that work for us. There's going to be things that don't work for us. There's going to be things that we're really drawn to and things that we're not. We're all going to be different that way. Your practice needs to be personal. You need to build your own foundations and your own practices. Starting out with others, trying and experimenting with their stuff is a really good idea. It's a great idea because it allows you to, see what actually works for you and what doesn't. The big part of that, you have to be honest with yourself. Did this really give me results or not? And if it's only partial, maybe it gave you some results. Well, what things did you feel? What were you connected to in that work, and what weren't you? Keep what you were connected to, build on that, expand, see, you blend something else into it, see what happens. Witchcraft is always about experimentation. Craft. It's not just building crafts, it is the craft we are building. We all vibrate differently. We all have different energies. We all have different things that we are naturally good at and naturally connect to. We all have our own modes of moving and thinking, and it's shaped by a lot of things, but they're ours. Our practices need to be aligned with that. Our practices need to be that same kind of crafting of ourselves. We're crafting our craft that matches and works with our energy and our talents and our movements. But allow yourself to grow. Allow your practices to grow. Let them change. Let them move. because you're growing. Your practices shouldn't stay the same, and mine don't. And the difference is I show it in real time versus showing it, in hindsight and leaving out all the messy parts because it's messy. Know that it's going to be messy. Know that you're going to make mistakes. Know that things aren't going to always work. It's okay. We're learning from all of them. You make a mistake, you learn from it. Something doesn't work, you pick it apart, you learn from it. What didn't work? Why didn't it work? What could be different? What can I change? Experiment, try, see what happens. And so that's really what developed crane practice. This idea of people that are blended practice. Our focus isn't learning specific rules and things like that. The purpose of crane practice is crafting your own path and practices. We all have our different modes. We're all going to do things differently. We're all going to have different representations. We're all going to have different connections and levels of connection. And so that gives us the diversity to learn from each other, to share those experiences, share that exploration and journey for ourselves. And through that, everybody's learning, there's this perspective, this person's having this experience. What makes crane practice work is the 3 rules. We only have 3 rules, and they're really, really easy. So authenticity. When you're there, you're completely authentic. You are just you, being you, not trying to be more, not trying to be, something that you're not. Just being real. Integrity. Be honest. Be honest in your words. Be honest in your sharing. And the 3rd, respect. We respect that we're not going to be the same. We're not always going to agree. We're not going to, be on the same paths, and we're not going to have the same, views of certain deities or guides or elements, and that's okay. We need the differences, even if we don't use them. Just knowing that perspective or that works for somebody else in that way gives us knowledge. My students give me knowledge all the time, like that. They don't see as giving back, but they are teaching me too, because some of them develop different ways of using the tools and the frameworks that I teach, and doing it in ways that I never would have conceived. Moving it into action in ways that I would never have thought about, or just never would have thought about. And so I have that knowledge now that this worked for this person. So the next person that may be struggling, I can suggest that too, as, one of the options of, hey, this worked for another student. It might be something worthwhile to try. Experiment, see what we get results with. So we're always learning from each other when we're telling each other our stories, when we're telling each other our experiences. Another great thing about crane practice is experimenting together. It gives you a group of people that a little bit, about their practices and stuff through their sharing, but you also, it's a group of people that want to be exploring and experimenting. It's how we forge and build our own practices and paths. And so if you have a spell or a working or a divination, whatever that you want to test out, that you want to see if the results hold for other people, or what kind of results they get, then create an experiment. And that's what we do. We create an experiment. We put it out there. We put out the parameters, whatever, aspects that they need to know. And they ask people to try it and join in with them. We do it all together. And we share the results of what we got, what we felt, what we experienced, whatever it happens to be. And that not only helps us, one, we got to experiment with something. Yay! Like to do fun new things. But it also gives the person that originally, had the experiment, the idea, it gave them information as to, what worked broadly or what was just working for them, or, some combination in between. And then you have the aspect of the people that participated. Maybe we learned something, whether it had been something about ourselves or whether it was something about maybe a part of the experiment or the whole experiment. We got something out of it too on that side. And so that's what crane practice is. It is people that walk the path with one foot in both worlds. One foot in the physical world, one foot in the spirit world. The unseen. The seen and the unseen. And instead of trying to fit into somebody else's box, we're building our own. We're building our own path. We're forging it and creating what works for us, what gives us something back in exchange. Because everything is about exchange, and your spirituality is really no different. It's an exchange. If you're not getting anything back from it, if you're not feeling anything from it, if you're not gaining from it, then what is the point of it? At that point, you're going through motions. It's not, is it real spirituality? Anyway, that's a whole other conversation. And so my crane group is really important to me, being with the crane practitioners and being in temple there. And like I said, it's not religion. It's not a specific tradition. It's crane practice. Now, there is a crane tradition that some crane practitioners will incorporate some of or all of. It contains the 4 guardians, the temple, which are 4 elementals. It contains things such as a color mapping of the body and the soul and the alignment within mind and into harmonious balance. It gives planetary energies and understanding of the cycle of the sky clock and time in that way, the way that we perceive it and experience it as humans, and the cycles that are within the cycles inside the sky clock. So it has a lot of astrology that is a blending of astronomy and astrology, and because it's actual positioning, not calculated positioning anyway. But it has those components. It has a lot of aspects of ways to think, ways to open your mind to receiving and perceiving the unseen. It's got lots of kinds of, it's got all of that kind of stuff. It's got soul runes in it that are specifically for magical work, doing magical work, doing physical world stuff. So there's a tradition that's crane tradition. But again, there's only base things that, give you a blueprint, a framework. But what you build within that framework, how you use that framework, what that means in your path and the parts that you do and don't resonate with, that's you. That's forging your own path. So even in the tradition, it's not the way that most people think of strict tradition. They're frameworks. If we work from frameworks, and the frameworks are there because we're not living alone on this vibrational space. We're working within all these different cycles and patterns. And so that's what the framework is, understanding the cycles and patterns of certain things, and then figuring out how we use them ourselves. There are certain things that we can share together because of the framework. And so there's always a common ground because we're working in that framework. But how we're working in that can look vastly different. And that is amazing. It's amazing that we can take a framework and work in such different modes, and looks like something so different on the outside, yet it is coming from the same place. And I think that's why it works. I think that's why community in that way works, because it doesn't take away the individuality, but at the same time, it gives us a common ground, not rules, not boundaries, but a core that we're connected to when we're together in space. And like I said, following the 3 rules makes it so you don't have any of the other problems that you normally have in groups. At least we haven't encountered them yet, thankfully. So some people would ask me, what am I? Where are my practices? What do I do? It's a complicated question because I'm not one thing, I'm blended. And secondly, I'm still growing. I'm still changing and transforming, and so are my practices. So what am I right now? I lean probably more animistic because I deal in spirit more. I deal in the unseen. That is my primary practices. And that's dealing with our dead, dealing with all of the unseen energies around us. I'm a Crane practitioner, and I follow Crane tradition. I'm both. And that leaves me the freedom to always be changing and growing, always transforming, because that's the purpose of this life. Everybody looks for purpose. Purpose is to grow, to gain knowledge, to gain experiences, because that's the only thing we're taking with us. That's what we feed the ancestral soul with, and that's the soul that's reborn. Carrying all that forward. So all those natural talents and things that you just connect really smoothly and easily to, most likely comes from your ancestral soul from another life where you made those connections already. As far as my spiritual, right now, it's the divine feminine, the goddess, however you want to look at it. That's the divine mother, the lady of the bones, the core of all of them. She is the death and the rebirth, and she is not technically even a she, but because we conceive in that way as humans, at least I do. I conceive in that way. It's easier for me to see human form. It's easier for me to denote as far as energy between the two, the Divine Mother and the Father of Worlds. And that's the second part. The Father of Worlds is coming back in, and it's really focused on their partnership. And we'll be going much deeper into that as we go, because there's a lot to say on the partnership, and there's a lot to talk about, not just from a them perspective, not just an energy perspective, but also as people. Because we're at a time right now where people are really divided. And this divide between masculine and feminine is getting ugly. And there's partnership there too. And it's everything reflected in our deities, our guides. It's reflected in our world and in our lives. That's my opinion. It's one of the reasons why you get the deities that you get, because they're the ones you need. They're the ones that you need for something, to see something, to learn something, to understand something. For me right now, I need to do more depth into their partnership. I need to really be working in that partnership. And that's what I've been doing. I've been doing a whole different kind of way of doing candle spell work and experimenting with that and trying all kinds of different modes. And I'll link my Pathos on here. There's several articles in there. There's like a part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4 about a recent one, going through all the steps and the reasoning, and you can get some about the partnership that's in there. But I'll link that down below so you can find it if you want to go read that and see what I'm playing with. But from a magical practice standpoint, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm working in this mode. I'm working with their two tools, the rosary and the mala. Hers is the rosary, his is the mala. If you haven't seen that video, I think it was the last one I posted, or the one before. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm working with some different kind of magic in a different mode. I am working with the Divine Mother and the Father of Worlds, Ushar. So where are you at right now? What are you experimenting with? What are you playing with? What are you doing? What's catching your attention? What are your needs? You know, when you think about witchcraft, it's about need. I mean, that's how we generally come to it, whether it's a spiritual need, whether it's a self-need, or whether it's a world need. And people find themselves coming to witchcraft for their needs. So what's your need right now? What do you need to fix? That'll give you a direction for your path. If there's something missing, if there's something that's going on, if there's something that you're worried about or you're scared of, or whatever, what's your need? Let it be one of those places that helps you get started. For the new witches out there, any of you that might be in the, just getting started or still haven't found your niche, your path, look at everything like a starting place. This is where I'm starting. I'm looking at this tradition, or I'm looking at this way of magic, or I'm looking at this very particular piece of magic, or whatever it is you're working on. Look at it as a place to start, a place to give you some understanding, some perspective to start with, or a way of trying something to start with. Experiment with it. See what works for you, what gives you real results. Keep the things that give you real results. Leave behind the things that don't. Forge your own path. There are rules in nature, and you will learn them as you go. Those are the only rules that we really have. Everything else is man-made rules. And so if it's man-made rules, then it was rules for some, but not rules for all. So think of, when people say this is a rule, think of it from a guideline perspective. Why are they saying it's a rule? And what is the potential behind that? They're not, it's their rules, but you could use it as a guide. Maybe there's a really good rule that they have, and it's because they've experienced something, and so you can put that in your back pocket. Does that mean that you'll abide by it? No. But it means that you know that it's there, that this person had this experience, and this is why they have this rule for themselves. So you can, it gives us all kinds of different places to start, different things to think about, different things to explore, and different things to understand for ourselves. But your path is forged by the things that actually work for you, the things you actually connect to, and the things that you actually get results from. So I'm going to end this here. It's been really rambly, kind of been all over the place. Sometimes over tea, I guess, it's just going to be like that. Because today it was, about a journey. And the journey is not easy to tell in small little snippets and soundbite acceptable lengths. But I've been documenting my journey. So none of this is stuff you can't find and can't see. And you can't, the messy's out there too. You'll be able to see it as you progress through videos or writing. You'll see how everything changes and moves and transforms and goes deeper. And I get a deeper understanding. I'm like, oh, it's not that the other was wrong, but it was just on the surface. Something that was just starting to be understood. And that's okay. I am fully well aware that some people don't like that, but I'm going to continue doing it. Because I don't know how else to share, and I'm never going to get to a point where I know everything or, I'm an expert, because there's always more to learn. There's always more growth happening, because I don't want to be stagnant. I don't want to just be sleepwalking through this. I want to be an active participant. So I hope you got something out of this. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below if you like this kind of content where we're just chatting. Also, let me know, where are you? Are you working on something? Are you looking for something? Is there a practice you're playing around with? Or is there something that you already have, that you've created, that you love, that you're really in right now? Tell me all about it. I'd love to hear about it. I really would. That's how I learn. That's how I grow, and it's enjoyable. It's the kind of content and interactions I want to have. All right, have a great one.